The most dangerous PMO problem isn't failure. It is slow, unnoticed decline. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is episode number 537. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody here today. And the Project Management Podcast also comes in a premium version for anyone looking for extra value. That means more PDUs, exclusive premium-only episodes, and early access to new content. Start at pm-podcast.com/premium to learn more, and then choose Supercast, Spotify Premium, or Apple as your preferred subscription platform. Now then, in his latest book, Understanding Project Practices and Processes, here on the right, Mel Bost discusses how project managers can apply proven processes and practices to deliver on project goals and manage teams effectively. In our interview right now, we will be focusing on chapter 4 of the book. It's titled PMO and Project Performance. And here in particular, we're looking at the question, what do I do if my PMO cannot execute? And you will learn how to diagnose execution gaps, identify and address root causes, and apply targeted strategies to restore performances. And now, joining us from Cave Creek in Arizona, to my left, by the way, I'm in Arizona as well. Here he is, Mel Bost. Hello, Mel. Welcome to the program again.
Hello, Cornelius. How are you? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, I'm doing well. The sky is covered in clouds today, meaning it's only going to be about 1 million degrees today here in Arizona, where at this time of the year it is usually quite warm. Now
well,
then,
we experienced a haboob the other day here in the Phoenix area. It was quite a storm.
Yeah, you had a sandstorm going down. Yeah,
came through, and my car is entirely covered with sand on the outside, so it's kind of
the joys of living in a desert.
Right.
All right, everybody. We are live. We welcome your questions. So if you are joining us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, please do use the chat and ask away. And also, if you're hearing voices in the background, that's perfectly okay. I have the painters in the house. They're right outside my office door here. So yeah, in case you hear something unusual, that's what that is all about. Let us begin by defining what we mean by PMO execution. Why it matters, and also how the book frames the challenge. So let's define this term then. Mel, when you talk about PMO execution in the book, what exactly do you mean PMO execution?
Well, Cornelius, we really are talking about the aftermath of the planning and setting objectives and planning, getting a good project charter in place and that sort of thing. It's the after those things get into place, execution is the next stage that we hope everybody understands when they're a project manager. Sometimes it's loosely understood, but execution is the actual carrying out of the processes and standards and procedures to get a result. And getting that result is very, very important, but also measuring that result and coming up with solutions for why it doesn't always occur the way you want it to occur is very important.
Mm-hmm. So could we say that we define execution as doing what we said we would be doing?
That's exactly right.
I thought so. Yeah. And in general, when we look at the book, by the way, I have the book here behind me. Wait, you can see it right there. There it is, standing proud. So when you wrote the book, in general, who did you envision is going to read it other than me?
active project managers and active PMO people who are actively engaged in developing the standards, processes, and procedures for PMOs, and PMO leaders. That's who it was designed for. This book is actually a compilation of about 120 essays I have written over the past 15 years about PMO behaviors, execution, measuring performance, and those sorts of things. I think it's one of my best books. I've written 3 books, but I think this is the best. And really, it leads people who are working in PMOs into understanding the ins and outs and what can I do if it doesn't operate well? How do I put together certain processes, that sort of thing.
All right, thank you very much. From here, defining PMO execution, we're going to move on in just a second, but we have our first comment coming in here live from YouTube from Muncie Daz saying, I'm an analyst at JP Morgan Chase. Surprising live on my timeline. Muncie, what do you do at JP Morgan? Financial analyst. And then we have Kasim Sen from Turkey joining us here today as well. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Moving on to the post-merger PMO story, because much of the chapter that we're talking about was based on the story that you told, that example of that merger. Can you walk us through that merger, the PMO's journey right after the merger, and what it was that happened?
Certainly, Cornelius. I was an active member of a PMO which was developed prior to the merger of Conoco and Phillips Petroleum. Those are 2 old, venerable, outstanding companies from the North American oil industry. One thing I want to tell you about Phillips Petroleum, a story that a lot of people haven't heard, is in the 1980s when they were drilling in the North Sea. The seas were so rough, the waves were so high, the crew members decided to call it off for the afternoon and just go in. And when the CEO, Pete Silas, Phillips Petroleum, heard this, he said a slogan that became a mantra for the oil industry. It's, we have to learn to work in the rain. And ever since then, other oil companies have taken that step. Whenever they face a difficult situation, they always say, we have to learn to work in the rain. So this particular merger between Conoco and Phillips, Conoco was headquartered in Houston. Phillips Petroleum was headquartered in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, where some of the early oil discoveries were made in Oklahoma. I, at the time, was working for a subsidiary, Phillips Petroleum, in Phoenix. And so about 6 months before the merger was consummated, they put together a team of experts. I was one of this team to help put together the processes, standards, and procedures whereby the PMO would operate. So as the merger was consummated, we started integrating systems. That was our first criteria: integrate the major systems of the 2 organizations. And over a certain time period, we worked and we measured our performance according to a graph. The vertical axis was number of systems integrated, and the horizontal axis was time. And we came up with about a 45-degree line. We were doing quite well over time integrating those applications. But after that, we switched our focus to integrating business functional areas, and especially regional marketing areas, like Conoco and Phillips both had operations in Canada. So putting those 2 organizations was together. And when we measured our performance over a certain length of time there, our 45-degree line started going off asymptotically. And everybody asked the question, what do we do when our PMO can't execute? Because they automatically assumed that we weren't executing the way we were previously with the systems integration. Now, I have to tell you, and you already know this if you're in a PMO, PMOs have a lot of heroes. people who will grab the bull by the horns and force it into play. And that occurred on several occasions with our systems integration. But the problem we found with that drop off in number of systems going together was the fact that we had an alignment problem. Stephen Covey often said, every organization is perfectly aligned to get the results it gets. That statement says a lot. It says for those organizations who haven't fully aligned their objectives, their plans, their execution, their results, the aftermath, if they haven't fully brought those things into alignment, they're going to probably fall short of their results. Whereas companies who do take the time to align those elements often execute their results and create their results every time they do that. So that's alignment is often very much a maturity issue. And since the Conoco and Phillips merger, the PMO that was formed there had never been through any type of project process management, process quality maturity like what Humphrey put together. They fell short on those alignment issues. The second thing that happened was we found that our project coordinators were not doing a very good job at instructing the group that they were interfacing with in the operational area in developing business plans. And the way we found this out was very interesting. So the first two issues I'd like to identify here, the first one's an alignment issue, and we talked about that. The second is changing objectives. Whenever you change objectives from, say, just a systems integration to fully integrating business units and regional areas, you run the risk of not putting new things in place that you need to for the PMO. Now, the way we found this out was by applying what I call systems thinking. That's systems thinking in the context of Peter Senge's fifth discipline. In other words, when the PMO puts a request out or a demand or some action, the next thing it does is it gauges the feedback it gets from those functional areas as to whether they've understood it, whether they're executing it, whether they need further instructions in how to handle it. So applying systems thinking is a very important aspect of a successful PMO. And I would encourage you, if you haven't done this before, apply some systems thinking to the work that you're doing. In other words, as a PMO employee or program manager or so forth, once you put an initiative out there, listen to hear what's coming back from your audience. Do they understand? Are they going to take action? Do they need further instruction as to what to do with it? And the last point I want to make is all these activities require a very robust organizational change management function. Having the right people in place who understand how teams operate, how individuals operate within a team is very important. Those organizational change management people are really very integral to how a PMO operates because they have the expertise to really see, are these techniques working? Do we need to put new people in place? Do we need to change our objectives and so forth? So that was an extremely interesting exercise to go through as part of a PMO. Asking the question, what do I do if my PMO can't execute? Maybe requires a little bit further look back as to what the situation is. That's the story.
All right. Thank you very much. So let me summarize this, and then we'll move back to things. So, your PMO was set up to do systems integration. It was aligned to do systems integration.
Correct.
Then you changed the focus more on the business side, and that, of course, brought these alignment issues. You weren't set up to do it that way,
right.
And now, and here we're getting into this here, right? So Factor 1 was alignment issues. Factor 2, changing objectives. Factor 3, don't forget systems thinking. And factor 4, organizational change management. So you've already gone ahead and talked a little bit about them. I want to go back here to factor 1 and the alignment issues. So let's start with this question here. How prevalent do you think are alignment issues in PMOs? Have you seen that in all the PMOs that you worked in? Is this something that was specific to that petroleum PMO that you were in?
No. The alignment issues can occur in any organization, and they're typically related to the maturity of the organization. If the organization has achieved a level 3, 4, or 5 on the capability and maturity model, inevitably they will have tackled some of the alignment issues or all the alignment issues, because understanding how to put together an original objective, carry it through a plan to execution, and then following up with the lessons learned process, trying to find out what the actual versus the expectation was and how we can feed that back to improve the process that we're trying to follow. The more mature the organization, the more closely they are to the self-optimizing region of capability maturity, the more likely they will have already encountered the alignment issue and taken care of it.
All right. Thank you very much. Let us then move on from the alignment issue to the changing objectives, right? This happens all the time. You set up a PMO for a particular reason. The PMO performs really well, like you have explained. You had a 45-degree line going up. But then, because you've changed your goals, new competencies are maybe necessary. So how, in your expertise, can a PMO recognize early on that changing objectives will also require a change in the skill of the people working for the PMO?
Well, this is typically recognized again through the maturity process. If organizations have been through a level 2, 3, 4 of organizational change management, the process improvement, so forth, they will have already incorporated the fact that they need to train their project coordinators who interact with the project community in understanding that a change in objectives requires a change in their focus as to what they're going to be conveying to the team that's going to be implementing that change. That's a typical thing that happens in most organizations today. Oftentimes, changes in objectives will automatically trigger through the maturity process the fact that those project coordinators need to be updated.
Mm-hmm. In your example, once you changed the focus, what were the new competencies, the new skills that your team needed in particular?
One in particular was understanding what financial elements go into a business case. Every one of the projects that went through systems integration or alignment or so forth, everyone had a business case attached to it. So it's very, very important that the project coordinators understand every aspect of the business case. One place they usually fall down is in helping the audience or the teams who are going to be putting these together, helping them understand exactly what financial objectives mean. What do they mean to the organization? What do they mean to the stakeholders? Why are they so important? That's the answer.
Mm-hmm. That means money, that means training, that means just you literally have to give your PMO people the tools and the knowledge and skills that they need in order to fulfill on the promise of the
Exactly.
PMO. Without that, it won't work, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because otherwise you have an alignment issue between the people and what the PMO is supposed to be doing. Yeah,
Exactly.
I get that. Yeah. We have a question here from Mansij Das, who came in. He is an equity research analyst, by the way, at JP Morgan Chase. Here is what he says, and I'll give my answer first here, Mel. Mr. Bost, a quick question for you. Do you believe that a PMO should own the strategy, or do you believe that it should own the execution? Right. So I have come to the conclusion that it depends. If we're talking about a new company, a young company that isn't really structured all that well, doesn't have the processes down, you want a PMO that supports execution, that helps project managers understand how are the project managed, what do I need to do, how do I develop a project plan, etc. And once the maturity of your company increases and your company gets more and more mature, then you change the focus of the PMO to adjust to the new reality. And at some point, your PMO will own strategy. So it really depends on where your company is at in the life of, in the journey of its life. But Mel, how do you see this? Should the PMO own strategy or execution?
I think you're exactly right. And a lot of it depends on the management, the higher level management of the organization, who they want to take the lead. Do they want the business functional areas to take the lead? Do they want the PMO to take the lead? And I really think it's related to the background of those people who are in higher positions of management, however they have come through the system. And what's worked well for them, they will implement in the PMO, whether the PMO takes full responsibility for the execution or whether they leave it to the business functional area for the execution. And so I think you ought to look to your upper level management for that type of direction. That would be my answer.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a second question that's coming in here from Betty Girasulo. Why do you think corporations fail to see the value in setting up a PMO? I can give you the answer from my own experience. A company that I worked for, they had tried setting up a PMO so many times and failed so many times. Why, historically, it doesn't matter, that they simply didn't like the word PMO any longer. So when my boss and I were supposed to, once again, set up a PMO, what we had to do is not call it a PMO. So we didn't set up a PMO. Well, we did, but we just called it something different, and that helped getting the thing off the ground. From your experience, Mel, why do companies not see the value in a PMO?
Well, I think if you benchmark the industry out there, you'll see that the majority of them of any size do rely on a PMO. Now, many of them have had bad experiences in setting up PMOs. They had failures in some implementation of some of their projects. But overall, I mean, whether you call it a PMO or not, you need an organization in the larger organization who takes charge of the structure, the performance, the setup of all the projects. Because if every organization is allowed to develop its own set of criteria for projects, there'll be no way for the organization, the larger organization, to really understand, where's my leverage? Where do I need to put my resources? That's one of the biggest things is knowing where to put your resources. Where do you get the biggest bang for the buck? And oftentimes, a lot of people who've had bad experiences with PMOs have gone away from them for that reason. But I think to a large part, organizations recognize that by benchmarking the whole industry, using a PMO is more fortuitous, more advantageous to have a PMO in place and have managers who have had experience in PMOs.
All right. Thank you very much. Let us get back to the 4 factors that we want to discuss here. As a reminder, we've already looked at factor 1, alignment issue here. We just talked about factor 2, the changing objectives. And we are now moving over into factor 3, systems thinking. Can you maybe share a practical example, Mel, in finding something that unlocks PMO performance when we talk about systems thinking? How did you do this? What was your approach?
Well, my approach has been to follow a lot of what Peter Senge talks about in his book, The Fifth Discipline, is to employ putting in objectives or something out there that you want your organization to react to, and then gauging the feedback that's coming back to you. Do they understand what you're asking them to do? Have they taken the lead at going ahead and putting it in place? Or do they give you the feeling that they don't understand exactly what it was that you're asking them to do? I think this applies to many, many things in organizations, not just the PMO or PMO practices, but taking that lead and putting something out there that you'd like for them to follow. Now, I've been through situations where we wanted to change the message that the organization was sending out to a larger organization. So we put out the message to the smaller organization that was required to implement it, that we wanted to do this. And the feedback that we got back was that they didn't totally understand what we were asking them to do, which meant we needed to go back and revise the message that we were sending them. I think that's the only way. A lot of false starts in organizations are preempted by this method, because then you get the direct feedback from your project teams and everything as to whether they understood what it was that they wanted to be communicating and carrying to the rest of the organization.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So that was factor 3 if your PMO doesn't perform. Systems thinking. From here, we are moving on to OCM. We want to ensure that the initiatives are supported by robust organizational change management, OCM plans to sustain the results. Now, Mel, if we're talking about OCM plans, what elements really make the difference between a strong OCM plan and a weak one?
OCM needs people in their OCM organizations who really understand how people react to the orders they receive or the directions they receive, and also what competencies are required in the organization to carry out a specific initiative. You mentioned the word competencies earlier in our discussion, and it's very, very important that someone understand exactly what competencies are required to carry out a particular initiative. So the people who stock the organizational change management organization or the process need to totally understand what message are we trying to deliver, what are the competencies that are required to develop and deliver that message, and how do you sustain that message and the interaction once it's taken place. I think those are the most important things that OCM individuals need.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, from here, from factor 4, OCM, we are moving on to going beyond. And by going beyond, I mean the following, and I'm picking up your book here, and I'm gonna, wait, I've just lost my place, have I? No, there it is. And I'm going to read a quote from your book. You write, there may certainly be other perspectives on analyzing the execution of the PMO, and I invite others to comment on specific situations that they have been involved in with PMO activities. That is why I said here, going beyond. So, Mel, have you had any feedback? Have others told you what factors they identified? Have you maybe found additional factors? Where else can we look if our PMO isn't performing?
Well, I think the PMO has to be a very fluid organization. It has to recognize some of the things that certain companies are doing themselves that may be taken in as part of the PMO operation. No organization uses every element of the PMO, but I think it's very important that we be accepting of new specific ideas. I've had some feedback from other people in PMOs who say that you need better project executors. You need more of what I call heroes before. You need people who at the end of the day can deliver that last screw in the last place and make it all work, because not everything with the PMO is as smooth as you would like it to be. So use of heroes in organizations, and also feedback from your customers out in the field. Oftentimes, organizations who provide a specific service or a specific product to an organization will get feedback from those organizations that they interact with, that often feedback into their PMOs and help them form better PMOs. I think every organization ought to be open to taking feedback and incorporating feedback where it seems to improve the performance of everyone.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much. We have one more slide, one more question left to go, and that is our usual take action at the end. But before we do that, there is one more question that came in from Mansish Das here, and he says, a final one. How do you stress test a PMO's resilience during downturns or cost-cutting cycles? I think stress testing, from my experience, isn't really possible. What I would do is, if there is a downturn, if there is cost-cutting, I would set up appropriate metrics, measure them continuously as my key performance indicators, and understand, is my PMO, even though we're in a downturn, even though we're cost-cutting, is my PMO still performing with these changing environmental factors? That's how I would do it. Mel, you have so much more experience than I do. Tell me, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you stress test the PMO?
I think that's exactly the approach I would take as well, is setting up some scenarios where the PMO could react and develop the outputs, and then test those against what they've previously done to see how well it aligns. I think that's exactly what I would do in that same situation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm glad we agree. All right, from here, going beyond past what Mel recommended in his book, we are closing things out with my usual take action slide here. So, Mel, for PMO leaders who are listening to us today, in your opinion, what is the single most important action that they should take today, tomorrow, in order to ensure that their PMO continues to deliver?
I've thought a lot about this, Cornelius, and I think what PMO leaders need to do is to understand their role in the organization. For example, a person can influence so much in an organization. Suppose you're a basketball coach, for example. The basketball coach can't set one step on the floor while the game is going on. He must rely on what his team, what his 5 players on his team do on the floor, which means they have to be very well instructed by the coach in exactly what he wants them to do and how to carry those things out. I think this is something we, as leaders of PMOs, we need to continually think about, is that our influence extends far beyond what we ourselves do. It extends to the project teams we're responsible for, to the organizations we interact with in the field out there, our customers, for example. So take that into account in everything you do from now on, is the fact that your influence goes far beyond what you just personally do.
Mel, thank you very much for those wise words, and thank you so much for being here today on the program and sharing your expertise and experience with us.
Thank you, Cornelius. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to your audience. I do encourage all of them to continue working with Cornelius. He's been one of the most wonderful people I've ever worked with. Let me put it that way.
Thank you very much for making me blush at this point. All right, everybody. Once again, the book that you see here on the right, holding it up right here, is called Understanding Project Practices and Processes. It is written by Mel Bost, CRC Press, and it is 215 pages thick. And just in case you need help with your lessons learned, let's not forget that Mel also wrote the book Project Management Lessons Learned, where he introduces you to his continuous process improvement framework. You can find both books wherever you normally get your reading materials. Please visit pm-podcast.com/537 for show notes and other information about today's discussion. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And yes, you can claim PDUs for listening to or watching this episode. 0.5 PDUs in the ways of working category. And now for something completely different, because finally we have this, a Monty Python meme, because as you know, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, or in our case, nobody expects PMO execution problem. Our chief weapon is misalignment and shifting goals. I mean, our 2 chief weapons are misalignment, shifting goals, and bad communication. I mean, our 3 weapons are misalignment, gaps, shifting goals, and bad communication. And if you didn't get that, then you're going to have to watch the skit by Monty Python. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And as always, until next time.